the pattern of rain, pictures in the clouds. Bird flight, visions in smoke, bone throwing, animal behaviour, symbols on stone, laying out cards, blackbird song, ripples on water, spatters of blood, flickers of flame, earth cast on the drumskin. Yes, this is D for divination. Welcome to my Pagan Challenge ABC video for D. This is more a witchcraft ABC rather than paganism. As, yeah, I count myself more witch as pagan, I guess. I mean, yeah. Anyway, complex terms, witchcraft. So, back to divination. There is fortune telling, of course. But also digging deeper in reasons behind events, digging deeper in self-understanding, finding answers to problems, and importantly, conversing with spirits or deity. Now, fortune telling is a bit looked down upon now, despite the fact it has a strong history in almost every culture and religion I know of. Of course, I don't know them all, so that is a slightly unreliable narration. However, despite Christians often being uncomfortable with it or even seeing it as evil, even if we look in the Bible, there is a constancy of events being foretold. Now, I believe Jesus, of course, foretells the death of John the Baptist, I think. The three wise men were astrologers who predicted the future in order to come to the birth of Christ. So, yeah, you read and see what you want to see in here, don't you? I've heard a lot of beginner witches ask similar questions like, should I use every medium? What is best for me? Does every witch use everything? Do you need tools? What am I supposed to be feeling? And what am I supposed to be seeing? So I am going to come to answer those later on in the video. If you already know the answers, feel free to turn off and go make yourself a cuppa instead. First of all, I'm going to introduce you to some of the tools I use, because, yeah, and how often I use them. Sort of how I go about using them, I suppose, really. I'll also do another video, which once done will be linked below, and that will cover herbs that I found helpful within divination. I started to add it in this video, but I just have way too much to say, so that gets its own spot. I guess it would be like a two-parter. So, divination is crucial to witchcraft because in witchcraft we need a way to access answers that others cannot, to heal, to find solutions, to push ourselves and others further on our paths, be it in witchcraft or simply in life, to gain knowledge. In the Oxford English Dictionary, divination is described and defined as seeking knowledge of the future or the unknown by supernatural means. Without knowledge, we would struggle our way through with mistakes and confusion. Sorry about that. It illuminates pathways we can take. I think it's one of the things that sets us apart as being a witch, though it needs to be present alongside other things. So there have been people practicing it, what is wrong with me today, sorry, who would not see themselves as a witch. However, I don't believe that, I think people would struggle to be a witch without it, that's what I'm saying. So, it runs through our history with people coming to witches to solve crimes, to find lost items, divine answers from the dead or about the dead, divine answers to whether they could have children, where an illness lies, where they should buy a house, and whether they are just cursed or unlucky. Actually, one of the first images of witchcraft that I fell in love with was one of divination. The witch with her flyaway hair staring deep into a crystal ball and drawing out the answers she saw within with her fingers. I know how many people love a show and tell, so I'm going to show you a few of my tools. Now, the bizarre thing about this is that I came to do this video just now, and I went to go and get my own crystal ball, Annabelle, her name is, and she's not there. I'm not sure what's happened. I have been doing work with the fair folk, and things do tend to go missing after I do that. So we're just going to say that it's a very funny joke and leave it at that. Now, it took me a really long time to choose a crystal ball. As a very beginner witch, I was also very concerned about, you know, what exactly constituted a crystal ball, I suppose, you know, what was important. And of course, as soon as I grew in the craft, I realised that, number one, what called to me was important and what I was guided to do was important. And number two, in some ways, the importance doesn't lie in the tool itself, but in your own ability. The tool can be simply used as a focus point. Now, with Annabelle, I keep going to pick her up and she's not here. With Annabelle, we have a working relationship, so she as a tool does give back to me and add to my practice. She's supportive and almost acts like a little medium. She's black tourmaline. A lot of people prefer obsidian, and I think that, I don't know, like there's kind of a thing for witches and obsidian, but personally it doesn't always gel well with me. And so I was called to by Annabelle. So when I use her, I set up a clear table space. I would make the room dark and I place a single candle directly behind her. So myself, Annabelle and the candle are aligned. Myself, Annabelle, the candle. Then I provoke a light trance, keeping my question in mind, and begin to gaze. When I bought her, I was expecting to struggle. I'm not sure why. I just thought it would be really difficult. And I actually found it much easier than I thought at first, which is kind of a proof of why you should try lots of things. You know, try what you can, basically, because you may find talents and gifts and ease of working in areas that you really didn't expect and may have even been holding off in because you didn't expect that. So she has been a really, really wonderful addition to my life and my divination practice. You can ask her any question, but she is particularly useful for spirit work and for questions where you want kind of long detailed answers or answers given in image type thing. And open-ended answers as well. So, for example, tarot cards, you do have obviously like 78, so there are a lot of meanings. But with working with a crystal ball, it's visionary and experiential. There are no limits to what you can see, experience, understand from it, if that makes sense. Or yes, that's what I mean. So I do also use cards, however, and I thought I would share my newest deck with you. I'm training in herbal medicine. So yeah, I am training around looking after my son and so on. And my husband bought me this as a gift recently. This is the Herbal Healing Oracle. I will show you some cards. Sycamore Subconscious. I'm really enjoying working with this deck and I have found it really accurate so far. I usually, with this particular deck and some other oracles as well, will pick a card for the day or during the day and use it as a guide for what to focus on. So I'll just share a couple more with you. Isn't that lovely? I really love the symbolism that has gone into this deck, and I feel that it really does connect with the plants that it's talking about and giving you as symbols. Now it is by Sarah Baldwin and illustrated by Ashley Verkamp. So it comes in this lovely box. Bit of a review going on here accidentally. One moment, I just want to grab the book. So I think the book is beautifully written, and it's just as good for anyone starting out as it is for people further on, really. I worked with the cards first, and I'm still reading the book because my time is a bit tight at the moment, and I prefer to have an experience with the cards first and then have a look. So as you can see, well, there's a lot of highlighting going on there, but it's a really meaty book, and it's just beautifully written. I mean, it gives some spreads, but let me see if I can find. So with burdock, its keyword is detoxify. I'm just going to read you the last bit, basically. Burdock is here to reflect your own hardiness and tenacity back to you. You are strong whether or not you feel that way. Removing yourself from emotionally toxic situations and removing physical toxins from your body will provide great strength. While it is necessary to distance yourself from situations and people, know that such a retreat is an act of courage. By retreating, you will restore your natural ability to assimilate the challenges of life, like an alchemist transmuting the base into pure. I thought that was just lovely. So yes, those are my oracle cards. Now I might also use them occasionally to divine perhaps areas of spell work that need work. So for example, the yarrow in this is boundaries, which would be a very clear message, wouldn't it, to strengthen your boundaries. So there are lots of ways that we can ask very simple witchy questions actually that can have quite a powerful way of influencing our lives and allowing us to focus, particularly because it can be quite hard to get focus in the modern day and age. Now my other deck, well, I've got several, but this deck, the Raven's Prophecy, this is, I've shown it before and there is a review somewhere of it, but I shall get it out again. I bought this to be a spell working deck, so it was going to be kept aside purely for spell work. However, it had other ideas, and it spoke to me so deeply. I ended up asking it a very personal question, calling out to it for help, really. And it gave me the most beautiful answer. And so I had to make it my main working deck, actually. As I say in the other video, the cardstock, guys, I'm not even gonna, I mean, it's literally, I could have just cut them out. That's how the cardstock is. However, you know, it is beautiful. And here we go. So we've got 6 of coins, 2 of wands, Ace of coins, 10 of swords. Now 6 of swords I think is a beautiful image. The Empress. So that's probably a bit difficult to see, but sort of a figure in the woods, and I just love that. I think that really connects to the wild and that element of giant as well. Queen of Wands. Now this image, I've got to say, it reminds me slightly of Kellyanne, which is bizarre, isn't it? But it's something about it. I think it must have, a very similar bit was in some art she showed once or something like that. But anyway, I think that's an epic Queen of Wands picture. I think that's fantastic, isn't it? Now, you've probably seen enough, but Three of Swords, and we'll end on the 10 of Wands. So many more beautiful images in this deck. But, however, so I actually think that these two decks are quite a good example of varied ways of working, because with the healing oracle, the Herbal Healing oracle, I tend to fan the cards out around the table, and then I will feel which card is energetically calling to me by running my hand lightly sort of over the fan, and I would feel like a shock almost when I find the right card. Anyway, with the Raven's prophecy, I will be shuffling and it usually flicks out cards for me. So if I continue, I get the full answer. And I can kind of feel when it's complete. It doesn't always happen, so occasionally I would use it in a more structured reading, but that tends to be the way that it does happen. Either that, or I get a very hot feeling in my hand as I'm shuffling and I get to the right card to draw it out. As I use it often, I've also learnt personal links through the different cards. So for example, when reading for myself, particular cards or a particular set of cards showing up together hold a specific meaning that relates only to me, which in some ways has occasionally applied to other people to mean something similar. But yeah, I've got a very almost journalistic relationship with these cards. So yeah, they're beautiful. I think that the creator of these actually writes fictional stories based on the Welsh myths, and that the cards can slightly correspond to the story, but I haven't read the stories myself. Perhaps when my son's older I might read them to him, because I believe that they're sort of older child, young adult, yeah, I think. So that is my cards. Now I use a pendulum. I'm in the process of working on a board for it to expand the answers it can give. It's lapis lazuli, which as a stone has links to truth. Try and hold her more still so you can appreciate the prettiness, but the colours aren't very good in this. So it has links to truth and relationships as well. So it fits very well as a stone for working with spirits and seeking answers. Now I adore this pendulum, and it has protective qualities to me. Its original chain actually broke, which is why it's got a ribbon on it at the moment. The ribbon does disrupt the movement a little, so we haven't worked together completely for a while, though I have tied it to make it into a single more balanced string. But yeah, so I would definitely suggest working with a pendulum if you can, because they're so simple, they're so easy to carry around. You know, they don't have to be obvious. So if you are, for example, living somewhere like you have housemates or so on, sorry, the wind has just got up here, but if you've got housemates and so on and you don't want for them to know, then it's a lot more not undercover, discreet, that's the word I'm looking for. It's a lot more discreet to have a small pendulum than it is to have a deck of tarot cards, for example. Now, I also think that you can expand, for example, like with the boards, you can expand the answers that you can get. You can actually do a letter board so that answers can be spelled out. Now, people often, if you read stuff online, it tends to give you what your pendulum is supposed to be saying. So, for example, it might say, if a pendulum swings left, then it means no. But actually, you need to work that out by asking your pendulum what yes and what no is and testing that out. The other good thing about pendulums is there are so many different types. And I mean, you may actually use a different pendulum for different things. However, yeah, there are so many different types that it's really nice to find ones that gel with you. So I have a metal one that doesn't quite gel with me. However, this one does, and I've held others which I didn't have. I wasn't going to buy them actually, but you know, I could have worked with those. It's about energy work, isn't it, really? And of course, I suppose that is a type of divining yourself, a type of intuition anyway, of how you are working with something, is going deeper and seeking through supernatural means to understand your relationship with another thing. Now, the last thing that I was going to talk about is palmistry, because I think as witches, trying out different things and expanding our knowledge is always good. Something I'm trying at the moment is palmistry, which I have tried, well, I have learnt some of before. However, I lost a lot of memory when I was in the coma, and I am relearning palmistry, reteaching myself. I just think that there is something very powerful about reading from a person's body and the touch of their skin against yours. The physical touch can hold access to extra information, provoke visions even. If we can divine in the stars and are made of stars, or from gazing on water and are born and made from water, then why not look to ourselves and our own physical forms to give oracular answers? It makes so much sense to me. And I'm really enjoying that, actually. A lot of the old information is relatively unhelpful and quite stereotypical. It's all a bit Victorian money grabbing, if you know what I mean. But if you can find the right books, then it's fantastic. Now, I'm not going to show you any more of my tools just because I don't want to overshare, if you see what I mean. However, I do use other ways of divining as well. I'm sure that, like, over the course of time, you'll find out some other ways that I used to divine as well. You know, scrying, for example, can be done in many ways, can't it? So, should I use every medium? What is best for me? Does every witch use everything? Do you need tools? What about tools only being gifted or found? So I would say, in answer to this, that most witches specialise. Most are better with one or two practices. But if you're practiced enough, messages should come through any medium at all. However, that's not anything for beginning witches to worry about. That's a natural progression and not one that can or will be pushed. You know, many people go sort of 40 years before they have that ability. So that's not, it's not something to get het up about or caught up on at all if you're beginning or in the earlier stages. Because of the way that I view witchcraft as being very linked to spirits and spirit communication, it makes it easier to understand from that point of view how a person could divine through any means. However, if you don't believe that, then you could see it as your intuition simply being open enough, or perhaps energy flowing through your souls enough so that connection with yourself is at its peak. you don't need certain tools and you don't need to have specifics. But certain things, for example, using natural materials and tools can really help. See, bizarrely, I wonder if my metal pendulum, for example, was too interfered with by man. I know that my lazuli has been carved, but I felt a very human imprint on my pendulum, my metal one. Anyway, so natural materials and tools can help. The feeling and help available from a crystal will be different to glass. However, you could still get visions in glass because it's you having the visions. And that is of the utmost importance to remember. What's best for you can only be found out through trying out different mediums and seeing what works and what you struggle with. You don't need to use everything. You know, it's fantastic to try things out. It really is. And if you have that ability, then try out lots of different things. I would suggest picking 1 or 2 to start with to focus on, because if you pick 9 things, it's very easy for all of them to kind of go west and get forgotten about when you get excited with the other thing. Whereas actually dedicating yourself to learning 1 or 2 practices first within divination is much, much better, I think, personally. So if you can't afford things, you know, tools that are beautiful and expensive and that everyone else has, except not everyone else has them, then it really doesn't matter. You know, use playing cards in place of tarot cards. I did for years. That's also great for, you know, if you don't want to be obviously carrying around some tarot cards. Find a rock in nature that's willing to help and be a seeing stone for you. Paint runes onto sea-worn stones, or use a bowl of water to gaze into. You don't need to be rich. You don't need expensive tools. You just need what works for you. I do have tools now, out of choice, but for a long time I worked with what I could get out of nature and the things around me. So, you know, the playing cards, but also different things like stones and nettle cords even. It's absolutely, there are so many things for you that are free and available, and it's just kind of working out what appeals to you, what calls to you, and that whatever everybody else is doing really doesn't matter. So let your divination style suit your witching style. Ask your spirits, deity, ori, or whatever you see is giving you answers to contact you in dreams and give guidance. There is significance in nature giving you a tool, because you are being gifted something you can use and kind of being guided to use it. For example, you may be gifted a hagstone, or perhaps you might find on the same walk several small bones that make up a small divination set, or finish off a set, you know, that you've been making. Often I've found this comes when you're not expecting it, and when you've been wondering about something, and maybe whether or not to begin something, or how to approach something, or whether you've done something right. Perhaps something, if you're making a divination set, for example, perhaps it's been causing you issues and you just can't get your head around what you want to do to finish it. And that is when, you know, you suddenly get this gift from nature. However, being gifted a deck by another person or a tool by another person, I don't think that needs to occur for you to start divining answers. I think it is partly to put people off who wonder and might dabble but not look further. You know, this tradition of, for example, the famous tarot deck one, that your first tarot deck must be a gift. There are traditions where gifting may be seen as important, but this is more to do with the work that a tool has previously done, you know, already performed, and perhaps also connections to spirits and energy, even the witch that previously had it, that are linked to that tool. I think those understandings and values have been lost and diluted, and it's now common to believe that a random person buying you a new deck from Amazon to gift to you suddenly, you know, is important. And it's just not really, in my eyes. It also has to do with the idea of guidance. So, you know, a tarot deck or rune set will appear in your life at the right time, much like nature gifting to you. But in my opinion, if you're desperate for one and feel called, then you've already got that guidance. So you don't need to wait for it to appear. You can go get it. You're in the driving seat, so you can choose to make a purchase or make the tool. If your first tool landed in your lap as a gift and started you off, then that's wonderful. But don't hold off from it just because a tradition tells you something, when it's not even speaking about your personal journey. So, the other questions: what am I supposed to be feeling and what am I supposed to be seeing? Everyone experiences the ability to divine differently. You might see images or pictures, and they might be very clear or they might be quite unfocused. You might get an impression of it in your mind, but not see it directly. You might physically hear spirits giving you advice and information. You might feel it in emotions or perhaps changes in energy movement around you. It might be a complete combination of those and 100 other things besides. But personally, I find that smells and scents often come to me, and those can then sort of almost trigger the image. But it may not be that I see the image, it's an impression that I get from this smell. For example, if I give leather jacket, mint gum, cheap aftershave, you know, that conjures a certain image. And for me, I would get I'd get the smell and then it appears, basically, and alongside strong feelings. And there are other ways that I get it as well, and I do see things, but that's just an example for you guys. Now, these experiences may also fluctuate. So one day you might do it brilliantly, and another day you might not. And I do think some kind of recording, you know, journal keeping and so on can be good for that. It improves with practice, and it's important to set aside time to practice. If you can do it daily, then that's fantastic. If you can only do it weekly, then make do with that instead. As you progress and you practice more, you'll find your own way to come out, you know, your own way of doing it really appears and becomes more obvious. I think each witch has their own flavour, you know. No magic is the same, and that is why sometimes the imprint on objects and so on can be very powerful from certain witches, and you can tell whose magic is whose. I think intuition and divination really strongly cross over, actually. I think in many ways they come from the same place. An interesting study looked at EGG activity in response to the emotions of a person distant to you. So one person was kept in a shielding chamber, relaxing, and the other was shown a video of them. So that's kind of, to me, I think that kind of plays into links that we witches know of, with pictures, etc., being a line to that person if you want to heal or curse or even find them if they're missing. So they were showing this video of the other person, and they were showing it along with stimuli to provoke emotional responses. The person in the shielded chamber's EGG response increased in response to the person who was being emotionally stimulated. Now, I think divination in some ways comes from that place, and the ability to open up to the world around us and to spirits has a lot of links to what we know as simple intuition or gut feeling. I'm not saying they're the same, but there's definite links there and definite crossovers. For example, a mother knowing her child is ill and knowing where that problem lies. And that's relatively common. you know, despite the fact that the doctors are telling her there's nothing wrong, for example. And we see this with animals as well, you know, dogs that are alerting their owners to cancer. Also knowing something is wrong, perhaps with a close friend or family member, and phoning them. And when you phone them, you know, they're in a complete state and they wonder how on earth you knew. There's also, of course, cases knowing someone has died before you've been told, and even seeing their spirit come to you as they die. I mean, that's more a spirit visitation, but your knowing of it before that spirit appears is the intuition. And if it's an interesting question, really, that does it have to be that you personally are kind of going out of your way to get that knowledge, or if it comes to you instead of you going to it, is that still divination? So yes, so spirit visitations and knowing someone is dead before you're told, as there are many recordings of course, in the world wars, most famously in England anyway. That's where we hear about it most. So I think working on opening your own intuition and the way you divine is really important in witchcraft. Now that includes working on protection when divining and in everyday life as well. As if you're intuitive, and particularly if you're sort of intuitive and empathetic and that type of person, you can end up feeling really drained. Now, I could do a video on how to protect yourself during divination, particularly if you are contacting certain spirits, I suppose. And maybe if you're feeling psychically open and emotionally open, if people would like. For now, though, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'm going to wish you all really well until next time, when I cover some of my favourite herbs to use in divination. And just some of my favourite herbs, actually. There's really good ones on the list. Many blessings, guys. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, night, any of those. Bye, guys.